Jeremy, you just raised the mob movie parlance of how are they going to come after him, and I'm glad you did. I'm going to run a clip from something we noticed. Laura Ingraham on Fox News just over the last hour. I'm going to play this for you. It appears to be an opening salvo and character assassination, and perhaps you can let us know what they're talking about here on the other side.
Here we have a U.S. national security official who is advising Ukraine while working inside the White House, apparently against the president's interest, and usually they spoke in English. Isn't that kind of an interesting angle on this story?
I find that astounding, and some people might call that espionage.
Jeremy Bash, there you have it. What are they getting at?
I think they're alleging that a U.S. Army colonel is a traitor, and the fact that he and his family emigrated from the former Soviet Union, they know more than anybody about the evils of the Russian Federation. And he's probably a very anti-Russian hawk, and his views are probably at odds with the way Trump has pursued foreign policy against Russia. So here we have the followers of Donald Trump doing what I think is absolutely despicable, which is claiming that not only is he against Trump, but he's un-American. And I don't think Republicans, Democrats, anybody who cares about our country are going to stand for that.
So, Anita Kumar, there it was, and presumably they will get more air support out of Fox News. The Republican talking point has been about procedure, basement room, secret proceedings, but that suddenly has a shelf life, and they're going to lose the ability to argue that as these hearings and transcripts come forward. So is there a day-to-day defense strategy for this hour tomorrow night when we learn more of what it is this gentleman has to say?
Well, Brian, you're exactly right. We've seen for the last month that there hasn't really been a strategy. The sole strategy has been whatever the president wants to say at that exact moment, several times a day. People in the White House, people close to the president, close to the campaign, don't really know what that one cohesive strategy is. They just, as you mentioned, recently have been talking a lot about policy and how there's been no House vote and how everything's been behind closed doors. And so that's been what they've sort of been rallying around. And they were taken aback today by the speaker's announcement that there actually would be a vote. And you saw just a couple comments about it, but not a whole lot from Republicans close to the president, because they don't really know what to say yet. They want to see how this vote goes. They want to see what comes out. They're going to have to kind of shift gears here and figure out something else to say.
Jonathan Swan, let's talk about a little bit of irony here. This is a president who indeed loves the phrase, kind of dated as it is, central casting. This is a president who likes to physically mime the characteristics of military bearing. This is a guy with a title from the NSC who would normally appeal in all kinds of credible ways in normal times to a Lindsey Graham. And yet here we are. These people with terrific resumes, with jobs on the inside, are coming forward one after one.
Yeah, and look, you might see, you played that clip from earlier, you might see some House members attack this Army veteran. I don't expect, based on my conversations with Republican senators, that you're going to see much of that in the Senate. I would echo what Bob Costa was saying earlier on. Republican Senate as a whole, I'm not speaking for all of them, but the vast majority are deeply, deeply uncomfortable with the substance of what's happened here. And that's why you saw that very timid resolution last week. The backstory to that was Lindsey Graham wanted to put out a fairly bombastic letter to Nancy Pelosi that would basically have been a middle finger, sign of solidarity. We're not going to go down this impeachment route. He got blown right back at the Republican lunch when he pitched it. They thought it was a stupid idea because it would create an instant enemies list for Trump. Anyone who didn't sign it would be on the enemies list. Number two, if they didn't get enough signatures, it would be a sign of weakness. So ultimately, he works with Mitch McConnell and they come with this very watered down document, which is basically a process argument. So I think tomorrow is really important because of who he is, that he's a veteran, that, as Jeremy laid out, a wounded veteran from Iraq, going to be very difficult to paint him as a partisan hack, and his concerns are going to carry more weight than some of the other testimony that we've heard so far.
Robert Costa, what is your knowledge of what went into the idea to bring everything up in the House on a vote, at least for a baseline benchmark resolution?
There's a push by House Democrats to bring more witnesses to the table. They're building a case relatively quickly, privately, as they make this behind the closed door investigation. But Speaker Pelosi wants to get more witnesses to the table. And to do that, she needs to break down the White House's argument and get more witnesses beyond these national security officials to testify. And to do that, she's saying to Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, we're moving forward with a formal vote. And so now when we make a request, if we subpoena an official, they better come up. And just one quick note, Brian, on Ms. Ingram's point. Is this, as a reporter, I wonder, is this really the line the Republicans are going to take, conservative critics of this impeachment inquiry, that someone who's an immigrant and has served this country is now a questionable person without any kind of evidence to make this case? Does this mean now immigrants can't serve in the cabinet? Arnold Schwarzenegger, we have to worry if he's loyal to Austria, if he's governor of California. On a logical level, I don't see how, as a reporter, this argument holds that Ms. Ingram made tonight on Fox News.
Yeah, and just to put it in brackets, that was former Deputy Attorney General John Yoo, who said out loud, quote, "I find that astounding, and some people might call that espionage."
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.